On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The smartest mind in all of the Big Ten Conference joins Locked On Big Ten once again. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Big Ten podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ben Stevens. It is Wednesday, June 16th, and I say he is the smartest mind in all of the Big Ten. That's because I truly mean it. Daniel House back on the podcast, the founder of GophersGuru.com, and we need Daniel's expertise and insight today because, as it has been reported late last week, and we've had a couple days off here on Locked On Big Ten, but now that we're rolling here in the middle of the week, it's our first time to talk about the college football playoff and the idea that the working group for the CFP committee has recommended moving to a 12-team format. So we need Daniel House. We need all of those smarts. We need all of that expertise to think about what this 12-team CFP might look like, how quickly it could be instated, and what that means for the Big Ten Conference. So first and foremost, Daniel House, pleasure to have you back on the show once again.
Big Ten, Ben, nice to see you. I was like, this guy's getting pretty busy. He's doing all these radio shows and all these big things. I'm like, I don't know if he's going to have time to do this podcast.
Listen, I'm just glad that you're here. I don't know if you'll have time for me at all times. So when I reach out to you and I say, hey, let's talk a little college football playoff on the show, I feel like you're doing a whole bunch of things because you're getting ready for the NFL season, looking at the Vikings, obviously the Gophers coming up for 2021. You throw in a new college football playoff format, all of these things that are going in Daniel House's registrar of what he has to do. I'm just glad you make some time for me.
Don't forget brand new basketball coach too for the Gophers. So there's like 80 storylines going on here. We're staying nice and busy, but can we just get this thing started? The college football playoff expansion in 2022. I don't want to wait any longer. Just get it started. It makes so much sense.
That's the thing. So late last week, both I think it was Pete Thamel first of Yahoo Sports and then Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic reported that the CFP working committee that's made up of a couple of athletic directors, conference commissioners, I know Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, is a part of that small group, recommended to the college football playoff committee to expand from 4 teams to 12 teams. Now, that is great. It is breaking news, and it seems like it will happen, but it has not been confirmed by the CFP committee. And as Daniel and I both know, and as you guys probably know from following college football as well, the powers that be at the top of FBS college football are a little bit slow moving. So nothing's been confirmed yet. This has not been absolutely instated into what we will see for college football, but that is what we are working towards, a 12-team college football playoff sometime in the near future. So Daniel, I ask you first, when this news came down late last week, what was some of your first reactions?
I was very surprised. I thought 8 would be the max amount of teams they'd expand this thing to. So going to 12 adds even more storylines because it not only opens a door for the group of 5 teams like Cincinnati, but it also gives an opportunity to the SEC and the Big Ten to get an additional team or 2 in there based upon the strength of schedule and certain components. Honestly, Ben, one of the things that first popped into my mind was there's no longer a need for perfection from these teams. So what does that create? Well, teams might be more willing to schedule difficult opponents earlier in the season because they know now they can afford to lose a game. Their resume might be better. So if they get a nice quality win, you're thinking like NCAA tournament now, quality wins. You want a good strength of schedule. You want to play tough teams because the advantage is if you're not going to win the conference and get one of those top 4 spots, you're battling to try to get that home game in the 5 through 12 slot. So love that idea because first round games, you get that college atmosphere into the mix, creates that dynamic. And honestly, I'd like to see the first 2 rounds played on campus because let's value the atmospheres versus the neutral site games. I know I love bowl games as much as anybody, but the travel involved with that and the fan base is what they'd have to do with that. I would rather see the first 2 rounds be on campus and let the 1 through 4 teams also have that advantage.
I completely agree with you. So let's talk about the structure of this proposed new format of the 12-team CFP. As Daniel alluded to there, it would break down as such. You would have the 6 highest-ranked conference champions, not 6 highest ranked Power 5 conference champions with a group of 5 thrown in there, just the 6 highest ranked conference champions, allowing the group of 5 a better seat at the table, in my opinion. And then you have 6 at-large bids from around college football. The 4 highest ranked conference champions will earn a bye into the second round of the college football playoff, where you will still have incentivized 5 through 8 seeds wanting to have that home field advantage for the opening round played on college campus sites. And I agree with you of the idea of having the first 2 rounds at college campus sites. The idea is that takes away from the bowls and the committees that found these bowls and the local city governments that use the tourism dollars to fund other things. As we have come to learn over the past 5 years, bowl games, although in its history and the pageantry and the tradition of all of it in college football, really have become a lackluster product because you're not having teams, you're not having fan bases travel at the fullest extent anymore, and you're having players that aren't as interested in playing in these bowl games, risking further injury when they could potentially just think of the next year that they have in college football or look to the NFL draft process if they have reached that stage of their collegiate career, and who can knock them for that. So I think from a TV rights perspective, the TV networks that will put on this college football playoff, they don't care as long as you give them a game. In fact, it might be even more hyped if you can think of a 5 versus 12 game played in Death Valley and Baton Rouge, or a 7 versus 10 game played at Happy Valley, Penn State hosting somebody. That is what you have at stake here for these first opening round games. So the TV rights money is going to increase. That, I think, will help push along the CFP committee to put this plan into motion quicker rather than later. And then I think you also have the idea that the traveling fan base is just as likely to travel to wherever that campus site might be, as opposed to Tampa, Florida in January to go see their team playing a bowl game. You will still have that from the fan perspective, to have the traveling road fans fill up as much as that stadium as they possibly can, and the atmospheres that we would have for home playoff football games with ramifications for the CFP. It like brings goosebumps to my arms right now, just thinking of those chills and that excitement we could potentially have here very soon.
All you got to do is preserve the New Year's Six bowls and make them as part of the college football playoff, and that's fine. Maybe protect the Cheez-It Bowl, because I'm impartial to the Cheez-It Bowl. There's just so much legendary lineage with the Cheez-It Bowl, so we cannot completely get rid of that. But I do like the idea of having the home campus thing, like I said earlier, because it just creates this difficult scenario. So Southern teams coming up to the cold weather, for example, you think about Georgia playing Cincy last season. And then in 2019, think about Florida coming up from Gainesville to Wisconsin. Winner plays LSU. Now that's just storylines. Southern teams getting a taste of life in the Big Ten and the Midwest. That's something that could create some very interesting and intriguing storylines throughout the college football playoff. And my biggest fear with this, though, is, the SEC is going to be clamoring for 3 or 4 teams every year. The only way this thing's going to work is if you're able to make sure that the group of 5 teams are treated fairly, which I think with the 6 conference champions getting into the playoff and having that part of it, it helps. Yeah. But yet again, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of the top 4 conference champions, just because what happens if, I'm not a huge fan of it, just because, the 4 teams, give them a bye. Generally the team that is favored wins in those situations. However, you kind of leave the door open for an upset. And if that were to happen in the conference title game, I guess in a sense it incentivizes the conference title games, which television partners want. So that's definitely the advantage there, is you can sell it as, hey, you got to win that conference title game if you want to get that spot. So I see both sides of the coin there, but yet again, give me the best top 4 teams and rank them. Don't worry about the conference championship. That's how I feel at this point. However, I see both sides of the coin.
Right. You could put it into context of last year in 2020. Oregon shouldn't have even played in the Pac-12 title game had it not been for Colorado dealing with some COVID issues. Oregon goes on to win the Pac-12 title game and gets a berth in a New Year's Six bowl that took things away from teams like Indiana or from teams like Coastal Carolina or BYU. So that's still a facet of this, that you need to win your conference championship game. The thing that I enjoy about it, though, is if Oregon were to win that conference championship game, they're not necessarily guaranteed a bye, as you know, because they wouldn't be ranked in the top 4 of those conference champions. It would, though, take away an at-large bid, but it means that conference championship games will still continue to carry weight. And I think one point that a lot of college football fans bring up, if they're a little bit hesitant to change, is the idea of devaluing the regular season, because it is so impactful from week 1 all the way through the end of the year. One loss could mean a non-bid to a New Year's Six Bowl. It could mean a knockout of the college football playoff. I don't necessarily see that being the case here with a 12-team format because, like we talked about, you are still incentivized to win at every stage of the year where you want to secure that bye. You still want to be ranked high enough to secure that bye. You want to be ranked high enough to be the hosting team in that first round of the college football playoff. So just because you expand at 12, in my mind, Daniel, doesn't mean you take anything away from the regular season. I think you could actually make the argument to the converse that it makes the regular season and some rivalry games we have late mean that much more for potential at-large bids or whatever it might be through the ending of the college football season.
You're not going, man, lost the game. Now you have no shot at the college football playoff. It creates intrigue throughout the regular season because now you get 2 losses, maybe you still have a chance. You can lose the conference title game with 1 loss and still get in it. It's a big benefit, Ben, when you look at it through the lens of the Big Ten. I look at like the second and third best Big Ten teams would have a legitimate argument based upon resumes. For sure, the top 2 teams. So, the Big Ten, for example, when the Big Ten West plays Ohio State, they're at an immediate disadvantage because Ohio State wins that title game. And then you're probably, most certainly on the outside looking in because it's always those top 4 teams that we're accustomed to. So it opens the door for teams like, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Penn State, Indiana last year, for example, would have been in the mix. It gives everyone an opportunity. And one of the things that I believe will happen is the Big Ten will get rid of divisions very, very soon. And they will choose the 2 best teams, the highest winning percentage teams will play in the conference title game. And you'll see that across the country because the conferences want to make sure the 2 best teams are playing and that they have the opportunity to showcase themselves on the big stage to get a spot possibly in the college football playoffs. So you're going to see a lot more lobbying, a lot more storylines, and like the classic November games, Ben, in the Big Ten, Minnesota versus Wisconsin, Huskers versus Hawkeyes. Those games are going to have even more significant implications in the future. And I also think, like I mentioned earlier, teams will think about scheduling more difficult opponents earlier in the season. So you not only get better matchups, you get the opportunity to possibly have meaningful games throughout the year because you eliminated the need for perfection. And then you also restore some of those rivalries to where they're really, really important already to the fan bases, but they also have just massive implications. So from our perspective, Ben, as media people, we have to be so thrilled about the discussion this is going to create because with the 4, what can we really talk about other than people getting snubbed? Like we went off about Coastal Carolina and Indiana a lot in podcasts right before the college football playoff. But now, hey, they're going to have an equal opportunity, which I love.
And I think when you look at this from a conference division perspective, and we'll tie this into the Big Ten because, of course, we are the Locked On Big Ten podcast, I think that's a tremendous benefit to teams in the Big Ten East where it's very difficult to knock off Ohio State. But let's say Penn State, as they had 3 of the past 4 years prior to a bad 2020, when they had won 11 games in 3 of those 4 seasons, you have a great path to the college football playoff now because your only loss is to Ohio State. You could then play, if we get rid of divisions, in that Big Ten title game, and you have a tremendous benefit of trying to make the college football playoff. I also think in the current iteration as it stands, let's say the Big Ten does not get rid of divisions as soon as this is put into place, this new college football playoff with the 12-team format, whenever that might be. But a lot of people report, and there's speculation it could happen in the 2023 season. So let's say the Big Ten doesn't get rid of divisions just right away. Let's put it in perspective of this year in 2021, because I think you bring up a great point about how significant this could also be to the other division, the Big Ten West. I think this year, Wisconsin and Iowa will be battling for that top spot in the Big Ten West. The winner of that going to play Ohio State more than likely at Lucas Oil Stadium for the Big Ten title game. Unless something crazy happens, I think Ohio State is going to win the Big Ten championship. But you could have a Wisconsin team this year or an Iowa team this year that has 1 loss or 2 losses. And in this new 12-team college football playoff format, if one of your 2 losses is to Ohio State and then another really good Big Ten team or one of your non-conference foes, that's very difficult. you're probably still getting into the college football playoff. So it opens up just an absolute Pandora's box of allowing more teams from the Big Ten Conference to have a better opportunity where you don't have to just knock off Ohio State every year to still be in that national discussion. Because let's face it, in the Big Ten Conference, until teams consistently knock off the Buckeyes, we can't really predict that to be the case. So you could have a Wisconsin team this year that goes 11-1 in the regular season, gets to Indianapolis, and they lose to Ohio State. They're done. They might be ranked 7th heading into that Big Ten title game. They lose to Ohio State. There's not a chance to make it in the college football playoff. They lose to Ohio State in the new 12-team format. Maybe they move down to 9, or they could still have a possibility of hosting a first-round matchup in the college football playoff, given their resume, especially when you look at Wisconsin and Iowa this year that play pretty tough non-conference opponents. Wisconsin has Notre Dame. Iowa has Iowa State. These are a couple of things that I think go back to your idea of these at-large bids that you can put in perspective as the College Football Playoff Committee to decide rankings and seeds as we get to who will have home field advantage, who might be a bye out of the top 4. So I love everything that goes into that. Do I trust in the College Football Playoff Committee to always do the right thing? Absolutely not. They have proven that time and again. That being said, I do believe it adds more opportunity for teams out of the group of 5, for other conferences to have a little bit more at stake as we get into the later parts of November and early December, where I think it opens up the playing field. And I think you also could throw in the idea that, let's say Alabama were to lose 2 games early on in their year in the 12-team college football playoff format, then they rattle off 7 straight wins and they get an at-large bid. Maybe they don't win in the conference championship game, but a 2-loss Alabama team that should be one of the top 5 teams in the country, you have them as the 11 seed. That could create some Cinderella-type matchups, or you have that opportunity, at least in a one-game scenario, to pull off the unthinkable. I think it opens it up. I think it makes it incredibly dramatic. I think it makes it more akin to what we see in basketball, although I'm not saying we'll have that kind of March Madness crazy mayhem idea, but I think it adds that opportunity for some more upsets, for a little bit more intrigue throughout the entirety of the regular season, and then we could have just absolute fireworks in the postseason.
Yeah, think about the NFL, Ben, how they do it, where a team can get hot at the end of the season and make a deep run. Think about the Giants when they won the Super Bowl and got hot right at the end. It does open that door, like you said. You stumble a little bit early in the season, you find your footing. You maybe don't win the conference championship. Maybe you do, and you end up getting in. It just gives you the opportunity to get better over the course of the season. And so I don't understand the argument of people saying that this, hurts the regular season and the luster that brings. It enhances it. I just don't see how it doesn't, because of the intrigue it creates and eliminating the need for perfection. That's what just was so hard for me to handle. Is you got really good football teams that maybe have a bad game, or you catch a bad break, a bad call at an end of a game, and then you're sitting there going, man, I don't have a shot at the playoff. Now you can stumble just a little bit, find your footing, and get hot at the end, and you never know what could happen.
And it's not up to the fate of the College Football Playoff Committee or other teams across the country in college football. You have the ability to still control your own narrative and your own destiny. Let's say a team like Michigan or Ohio State or Wisconsin or Minnesota, whoever it might be, loses a marquee game early on in the year, week 4, week 5. They're now thinking, my chances just reduced drastically to make the college football playoff. There might be a couple games that they're not as up for, not as intrigued or excited by, because their chances of making the college football playoff aren't that great. But in a 12-team expanded format, you are still dialed in to each and every week, thinking that if we hit our stride at the right time, we'll be exactly where we wanted to be entering the year. So I agree with you. I think from week 1 in early September all the way through the end of November, there is still a ton of intrigue and necessitates that level of getting up for every game that we don't see right now in the current iteration. Let's also not fool ourselves. The teams like Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Oklahoma, Georgia, they're still going to be at the top. They're still probably going to be bargaining for the top 4 spots on a consistent year-to-year basis. In fact, in the 7 years of the current CFP system that we have, 20 of the 28 available playoff spots have been taken by Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Oklahoma. Yes, they are still going to be there. Are they still going to be battling probably to win the national championship more often than not? Absolutely. But still, you have the potential for upsets to happen. You have the potential for intrigue to carry on all regular season. And then you just have some great one-off environments. And even if we have a 6 versus 11 game, that's not maybe all that exciting in terms of what we see on paper. And the 6 team that ends up winning is not going to win in the next round, not going to knock off top seeded Alabama, whatever it might be. Think about that one game that you might have at name whatever, insert here, college stadium across the country. That is just going to be wonderful television and wonderful excitement for fan bases, players, staff, everybody involved. And at the end of the day, because money is the bottom line, generate a ton of revenue for the College Football Playoff Committee.
And you think about the Big Ten, Ben, with the idea that Camp Randall, Kinnick Stadium, and the College Football Playoff first round game, all the buzz that generates on campuses and the environment it creates, that's what intrigues me the most, because that's what makes college football special. And when you have these neutral site environments, it just becomes stale, and you don't have that travel. The fan base is not as big at those games, versus now you give Iowa and Wisconsin a legitimate chance to advance and get hot. You never know what can happen. And with the fan base behind you, riding that momentum over the course of a couple games, and maybe you start slow, but you pick up fast. That's the big thing for me, is that Iowa, Wisconsin, Penn State, teams like that, they're all going to benefit from this. And the SEC also will have some teams that also have arguments to make. And you know that that's going to happen. And that's my biggest fear over this college football playoff, is that the SEC just gets all these teams in here, and then it really hurts the other teams that might have a better resume.
And that is still going to be a part of it, because at the end of the day, we're still trusting in Bill Hancock, and the rest of the people that he puts on the College Football Playoff Committee that go and use the eye test and sometimes make very questionable decisions based on metrics and strength of schedule. All of that is still going to be a component of it. This is not a perfect system by any means, but we don't want perfection. We want something that's a little bit more agreeable and allows a little bit more of opportunity to happen. We still want to be able to yell and to rant. Believe it or not, that's one of the best parts of being a fan of college sports. And it happens in the NCAA tournament, and there's 68 freaking teams that get a bid to the big dance when we get to March. So still, there will be a lot of those components. And yes, there will be times where we're arguing if the 3 seed in the SEC is more deserving than the 2 seed in the Pac-12. Yes, there are going to be times that we go through that. Can Jimbo Fisher get Texas A&M in there, although their 2 losses are to Florida and Alabama? Yes, we're going to have all of those discussions still, but it opens up more opportunity for other teams that haven't had a seat at the table yet, and for more teams that play in conferences that have always been a part of this. And if you think in the Big Ten, we're highlighting Ohio State too much and just still saying it's going to be a given, the Buckeyes make it, it also opens up opportunity for Ohio State in a possible year that if they are to lose in a game they're supposed to win, or if they are going to lose to a rival like Penn State or, dare I say, Michigan, there's still an opportunity for them to get an at-large bid to the College Football Playoff. And again, I really break it down in the 3 components of what we'll see. 1 through 4, there's incentive. 5 through 8, there is certainly incentive. 9 through 12, of course, trying to make it into the College Football Playoff is incentive enough. When you look at 5 through 8, to have that home field advantage in that opening round playoff game, huge, tremendous incentive, not only from a revenue perspective, but of course, the momentum of actually playing on your own home turf. And then 1 through 4 to stay locked in through conference championship week, to make sure you can secure a bye, rest up, get healthy while everybody else is battling it out. I mean, every level that you break down this 12-team college football playoff, it just gets more exciting to me. And that's why I love going to 12 teams as opposed to 8, because again, I think it opens up more opportunity and it keeps that incentive there throughout the entirety of the regular season.
You have 3 different tiers, and all have a little bit different storyline within them. You're battling into the college football playoff. You're fighting for that home first round game. And then you have the teams that are trying to get the bye. So everybody's fighting for something different. And those battles between 4 and 5 will get very hot as well. And who's going to make the conference title game? That also ties right into the regular season and how you perform there. So again, another way that the regular season also will be of value, because you need to be able to make it to your conference title game. The other angle that I've been thinking about, Ben, element nobody's talking about right now, is how this could tie into NIL with the name, image, and likeness likely going to pass. These athletes will play a couple more high-profile games. They'll be on bigger stages, which can be good for their brands and exposure, and possibly gives the NCAA a chance to sell that, hey, you're going to have an opportunity to bring in a little bit more revenue because you're on a bigger stage, make a name for yourself, and then possibly go up and play professional football in the NFL. So that's the angle that popped into my head right away, as we're already entering a new era of college football with this name, image, and likeness on the horizon. When you add games that are on a bigger stage across the country, nationally televised college football playoff tier football games, it changes the whole game, and it could have a nice benefit on the players.
And I think from a fan perspective, that also adds in motivation for players, because I know a gripe of fans throughout these bowl games, or maybe a lackluster season, is the opportunity to allow the players to have that individualistic nature and to opt out or to not play in that bowl game. But if there's the potential of still making the college football playoff, if there's a potential of still qualifying for a conference championship game to stay in the hunt, you're going to have your team, your school's best players out there still obviously motivated to get to that stage because they can profit off of it, which I think is a wonderful thing. So it's almost, a handshake type of meme here where you have the college football playoff and the players both looking for that revenue. That's not something you generally see in too much congruence throughout college athletics, is having the players and the powers that be on the same side. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at the college football playoff and what the 12-team format allows, it is much larger revenue. And that's a huge component of this, as much as we like to, try to stick to the idea of, amateurism in college athletics, that I think up until this point we have an idea is pretty much a farce. So I think let's go through this a little bit and look at the Big Ten specifically and what the path is moving forward as we hope to get this college football playoff instated into what we have normally throughout a regular season. So you brought up this idea, which I agree with, and I think is an idea that will certainly be floated. And if it's not already in the league office, Kevin Warren, please wake up, is the idea to get rid of the divisions. And if all the reporting is correct, that the earliest we could see this implementation of the new college football playoff is 2023. Daniel House, in your mind, do you think we would see the Big Ten go divisionless by that 2023 campaign?
Absolutely. It will be done. I can guarantee that the divisions will be gone and they'll go with the two highest winning percentage teams. It makes so much sense, and other conferences will follow suit if they have a divisional format. You want your best teams to have a shot at the college football playoffs. So it incentivizes, again, all of those teams competing for the top two spots in the Big Ten versus maybe having an easier ride on one side of the aisle where, like the Big Ten West, the door is usually open. Big Ten East, Ohio State's probably going to be there every single year. They will be. Big Ten West, there's more opportunity, and it hurts teams like Indiana last year, who should have been playing Ohio State in the title game, and as well as the Hoosiers played Ohio State earlier in the year, it would have been the best matchup. So that's what the Big Ten is going to try to create here, and it ties hand in hand with the college football playoff.
Let's take an idea of that, Daniel House, because I think you bring it up beautifully. And let's put it in the context of this 2021 campaign that is coming up here very, very soon. We are already in the month of June. We are moving closer and closer to fall camp. Let's look, for instance, at the 2020 schedule and look at Halloween weekend this year. It is going to be one of the best weekends of all of this Big Ten slate. And when you look at the ideas of division races, but also if you were to take out divisions, the hope and optimism that you would still have if you were to falter in one of these games as either team. And what I'm playing out here is Wisconsin plays Iowa in Madison, Halloween weekend. I think as of right now on paper, the winner of that game will win the Big Ten West division this year. You also have Halloween weekend in Columbus, at the Shoe. You have Ohio State hosting Penn State. So two hugely impactful games for their respective divisions happening on one weekend. Can you imagine a world that instead of just thinking, okay, if Penn State loses this game, they're done, or if Iowa loses this game to Wisconsin, they're done, if they still perform well through the rest of the year, and you're talking about a 2-loss Iowa team and a 2-loss Penn State team, they still have so many opportunities to play through and to try to contend for that second spot in the Big Ten Conference behind whoever it might be. Right now, we're giving that credit to Ohio State, and fairly so, but it still opens up that horizon that your season is not done with 4 weeks left to go. Because in this current format, if Iowa or Wisconsin lose to the other, vice versa, or you have Penn State lose to Ohio State, they're done. They don't have a path to making the Big Ten title game that is under their own control, that is not with a couple of stumbles down the stretch for teams that generally don't stumble by the time we get to November. So I think it opens up so much more opportunity within its own division to have the greater context of the college football playoff. And it gets me excited talking about it because you put it into context of what we will see in 2021 and how awesome Halloween weekend is going to be. Magnetize that by 5 by the time we get to this new format of the 12-team college football playoff.
But again, you reach that point of the season, week 9 in the Big Ten, and there's still intrigue in this scenario because teams aren't finished yet. And that's what I keep coming back to is all of the games matter. You have these really good matchups. The Big Ten scheduling department just has to be overjoyed with the thought of some of the games that you can package in the last 4 weeks of the season. This is like the NFL, Ben. I've always said the NFL is the best at marketing and putting their product out there. They want the best players playing each other late in the season. They want the primetime matchup. It gets the specific team in the limelight, keeps the league just chugging along, where the Big Ten can do this with the format that's laid out here. You can have these late season games jammed up with the best players playing each other, the best teams matched up in awesome environments. And it just adds so much intrigue to the conference and has major implications, preserves rivalries, which you don't get that in the NFL as much in terms of like these deep-rooted college football rivalries that can be preserved and continued and have another layer added to it with college football playoff implications. I love the thought of it and the entertainment value it provides for the Big Ten.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree. I think that's such an astute point there at the end, too, because you allow that flex type of scheduling that you can move a game week 11 to a primetime game because it has such significant impact. We're not getting rid of the game. We're not getting rid of the axe. We're not getting rid of the Huskers, Hawkeyes rivalry that's becoming more of a rivalry. We're not getting rid of any of that. It just adds on another layer, and you have some of that flexibility right before it, too. So I think it's going to be just fascinating stuff for college football. I cannot wait for this to get implemented into the lexicon of what we know across the college football landscape. You're hearing reports it's 2023. I think that's probably the earliest we see it. The college football powers that be are a little bit slow moving at times. So first we need them to confirm that we are going to 12, and then it's the implementation process of how quickly we get this system to be a part of our lives. I'm hoping it's 2023, Daniel House. I really am. I'm a little bit hesitant to go fully in on making sure that the College Football Playoff Committee will do what we all expect them to do and do the right thing. But I think it's happening sooner rather than later. And again, if you take one thing away from these 2 episodes with Daniel House about the new 12-team format of the college football playoff, it's more opportunity across the entire country. Also, a ton more opportunity within our very own glorious Big Ten Conference.
It's a major opportunity, and every team will have a chance. And that's the thing that's very notable to me is Wisconsin's, Iowa's, teams like that are consistent. They will be rewarded and have a chance to possibly get hot. It's just like the NFL in the playoffs. If you get going at the right time, you open the door for a team to potentially make some noise. And the Big Ten feels like a conference that could really benefit from that more than others.
This was a wonderful 2 days here on the Locked On Big Ten podcast. There were numerous times when I was speaking with the smartest mind in all of the Big Ten Conference that I had chills as he was laying out the potential of what is on the horizon for the college football playoff if we do, in fact, expand to this 12-team format. It was wonderful stuff. I'm so glad to have had your insight here, Daniel House, because without it, I don't know if I'd be as ready as I am right now. I'm ready to run through a brick wall. I'm so excited.
I'm ready too, Ben. You got me hyped as well. This is a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to Big Ten football. And then next season, can we get college football playoff next season? I want it right now. I got my fingers crossed, and I know you do too.
If we get it in 2022, it would be an upset in its own making, but go to show that we are off to a right start, a good start for the new college football playoff 12-team format. Daniel House, the founder of GophersGuru.com, the smartest mind in all of the Big Ten Conference. Thank you very much for your time and your expertise these past 2 episodes of Locked On Big Ten.
We'll see you soon, Ben.